millionaire faces chaos as a street kid shocks everyone by interrupting critical talks. The glass walls of the boardroom shimmered as the last rays of the sun bled red across the city skyline. Jonathan Cross stood at the head of the polished table, his sharp eyes scanning the skyline, but not really seeing it. His world was all steel and glass, power suits, and quiet commands. Tonight was supposed to be just another game, a critical meeting that could steer his empire into untold wealth. Yet in the pit of his stomach, something twisted. A cold, unwelcome knot of unease. The air hummed with tension inside the room. The city's heartbeat below felt miles away, replaced by whispers of deals and promises that smelled like money and risk. Jonathan's hand clenched the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. He could feel every pair of eyes locked on him, waiting for the words that would pave the future. But his mind kept circling back to that nagging dread, the feeling that something... Murmurs erupted, sharp gasps and curses under breath. "Who the hell is this?" someone hissed. Eli didn't flinch. His voice cracked through the room like thunder. "You're making a mistake. This deal, it's about to ruin everything. People are dying out there, and you're sitting here counting profits." He stared right at Jonathan, bold and fierce, shaking the polished floor of that high-rise castle. Jonathan's chest tightened, a surge of anger, mixed with a flicker of something unexpected. Fear? Was this kid telling the truth? How much of that comfortable bubble was a lie? The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Some shifted in their seats. Others gripped their coffee cups like lifelines. The polished world they controlled suddenly looked fragile and cracked. "Get him out!" barked one of the senior board members. But Jonathan raised a hand, stopping the rush. He needed to hear this. Needed to figure out what Eli was really saying. The boy's wild message dug into the room's silence, prying open secrets no one wanted spoken. Eli took a deep breath, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed loud. "If you go through with this, the company won't survive. Too many of us are already crushed beneath the weight of your deals." His eyes were steady, burning through the luxury that lined the walls. "It's bigger than money. It's life or death." Jonathan's hands trembled slightly, caught between the comfort of control and the chaos at his doorstep. The city outside darkened, shadows creeping up like fingers. What Eli had unleashed in this room was more than shock. It was a reckoning. The boardroom held its breath. No one moved. Everyone was waiting. Waiting to see if the Titan would crumble or stand unbreakable. But Jonathan's mind raced, pulling him into a storm he hadn't seen coming. The meeting was no longer about charts and contracts. It had become something raw and real. And then Eli dropped the bombshell no one expected. A secret so explosive, it shook the foundations of everything Jonathan thought he knew. The room exploded into gasps and murmurs. Eyes widened. The city's lights flickered outside like warnings. What would Jonathan do now? The choice was his, but the outcome? Impossible to predict. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without warning. Just quickly check that red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're at it, leave that powerful like. It helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know each incredible person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. The office fell dead silent. The only sound, a low murmur, stopping on a knife's edge. Jonathan's breath hitched. The secret Eli had just dropped hung heavy in the air. Tiny shards of truth waiting to fracture everything. But before anyone could move, someone hit the floor behind Jonathan with a sickening thud. Heads snapped around. Mila Cross lay sprawled on the ground, pulse faint but racing. Jonathan's breath caught in a strangled cry. His sister, his closest ally, his anchor, his secret. He knew I was coming. He nodded toward Mila, then flicked a glance at Jonathan, eyes darkening. You don't just stop deals like this without consequences. The truth isn't just out, it's screaming for blood. Faces around the table turned pale. Whispers crawled in the corners. Accusations and fear tangled in rising tension. But Jonathan's world shattered more deeply, because like a punch to the gut, a memory hit him. The vague notice of a voice on the phone earlier. A thread he'd brushed off. A warning, a threat disguised as a greeting he'd ignored. And worse still, Mila's limp hand twitched. Then a whisper escaped her lips. Jonathan, it's not what you think. His fingers found her wrist. Warm. Strangely warm. His mind raced as minutes stretched into moments. Wait, she gasped faintly. Eli's not who he claims to be. He's part of this from the start. A cold wave crashed over the room. Eli's eyes flicked sharply, almost a flash of pain, or something darker. What? Jonathan's voice cracked. His sister's words didn't just complicate the moment, they flipped it on its head. The chaos outside, the deals, the people crushed. It's all part of a bigger plan. And you're right in the middle, John. You've been played. Silence fell again. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding. The city lights outside flickered in Morse, a broken warning against the dark. The kid who stormed in claiming to save lives, now possibly the puppet master, maybe worse. The sister he thought was a victim, maybe a conspirator. Jonathan's world, built tall and proud, began to crumble, piece by piece. The line between friend and foe blurred like smoke in the cold air. And just as the paramedics burst through the door, a new thought struck him harder than any blow. What if the real enemy wasn't outside this tower at all? The question hung heavier, even than the shattered glass, darker than any secret. Who was Eli, really? And who had been pulling the strings all along? The paramedics rushed in, their voices sharp and quick, orders snapping like a whip. Jonathan knelt beside Mila, his hands shaking so hard he could barely steady her arm. Her eyes fluttered, pupils wide and glazed. The room was a humming chaos. Phones ringing, urgent whispers, the metallic clink of medical tools. But Jonathan's world had shrunk to the flicker of Mila's breath, to the desperate hope wrapped in her weakness. "Jonathan, listen," she gasped, eyes locking on his. "Eli, he's not a kid. Not just that, he's me." Jonathan blinked. His heart slammed against his ribs like a warning bell. The noise in the room dimmed. A tight, suffocating silence squeezed him. "What?" His voice cracked, raw. She coughed, a rattling sound, but pushed on. "I faked it. The street kid, the rebel, for you, for everyone. I had to get in, to reveal the truth." Her lips trembled, and a tear slipped down her cheek. "I've been both, the shadow in your empire and the spark trying to burn it down." Faces around the table went pale. Murmurs spun into confused gasps. Eli, no, Mila, slowly pulled off a torn disguise, ripped away the ragged hoodie and wild curls. The teenager's face and the woman's, his sister's, merged into one. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat, his heart twisting. The kid who shook this fortress? The boy who tore through their lies? It was Mila, all along. His sister, his secret, his strength, his betrayer. "No," he whispered, voice trembling. "How could you?" She reached out, her eyes blazing, pain raw and honest. "Because you never saw it. The damage, the people you crushed. I needed you to listen, to feel it." Her face cracked, a fragile mask breaking. "I had to become the enemy to save us." The room shattered. Again, the board members recoiled like a physical blow. Some stared, frozen. Others whispered, their faces pale and unbelieving. Jonathan's mind scrambled through shock, betrayal, a crushing emptiness. His sister, his fiercest ally, had played every side. The secret wasn't just that Eli was a stranger. It was that Eli was Mila herself, living two lives in the shadows. And then chaos reached beyond the boardroom. Lights flickered wildly. The building groaned, a low, ominous rumble vibrating through the glass and steel. The floor beneath them shuddered, cracking faintly. "Earthquake?" someone gasped, panic rising. "No," Mila said, her voice sharp, urgent. "They're not done. This was a distraction." The blast blew out the windows, forcing everyone to the floor. Glass sprayed like ice shards, cutting faces and flushing the room with red dust. Coughing, Jonathan scrambled up, heart pounding, then froze. Among the chaos, a figure emerged through the smoke. Calm, dressed in black, face hidden by shadows. Not Eli, not Mila, but someone far worse. "Good evening, Jonathan." The stranger's voice was cold steel. "You've been a pawn longer than you realize." Jonathan's pulse hammered. The stranger stepped forward, pulling down a hood to reveal his own face. Jonathan's knees buckled. It couldn't be. Impossible. But there he was. Me, or who you thought I was. His doppelganger smiled, cruel, twisted. Time to meet the real mastermind. The boardroom froze. Mila gasped. The paramedics stopped mid-step. Jonathan stared, the room spinning. The world he knew was a lie, doubled, fractured into a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Who was this? How? And if the man beside him could be a shadow, then what truth was left to hold on to? The question screamed louder than the shattered glass, and the city waited below, unaware of the monster now rising inside its tallest tower. The stranger's grin stretched too wide, a frozen mask of cruelty that twisted like a knife. Silence slammed down, heavy and sharp. Jonathan couldn't move. His knees trembled, and the blood drained from his face. The cold, dark twin standing before him wasn't just a copy. It was a warning, carved from his deepest fears. "I'm the shadow you buried," the doppelganger said, voice low and venomous. "The part you tried to erase." Jonathan's heart pounded in his ears. Mila's weak hand still gripped his. Her eyes flickered with pain, but beneath that flicker, a sudden flicker of fear. The room's panic shifted into frantic whispers. Phones dropped. People stared like they'd seen a ghost, and worse. And then the stranger moved suddenly, but not with violence. Instead, he pulled something from inside his coat, a small, worn photograph. He held it up, trembling fingers exposing a faded image. A younger Jonathan, Mila, and a third figure, all smiling in the sun, untouched by this nightmare. Jonathan's breath caught. The photo wasn't part of the boardroom's twisted puzzle. It was a secret, buried deep under years of silence. "Who's this?" Jonathan asked, voice cracking. The stranger's eyes burned. "Your brother, the one you don't remember." A cold shock froze the room. Jonathan stared, confused, heart seizing. "I don't have a brother." The man shook his head slowly. "You did, until you made him disappear." Silence dropped like a bomb. Mila gasped weakly. "John, he's talking about Adam." Adam. The name clawed at Jonathan's memory, jagged and raw, buried under years of blackouts and quiet lies. The stranger stepped closer, voice low, slicing through the tension. "You erased him, not just from your life, from history, but he never left." "Not really." Jonathan's hands clenched the table. His mind raced, flashing with broken images. A small boy's laugh, a scream lost in the dark. A moment gone too fast. You don't remember, because you made sure you'd forget. The twin smiled cruelly. But he's here, watching, waiting. Mila's grip tightened painfully on Jonathan's wrist. Adam was part of this empire, part of the price you paid, the failure you hid behind your power. Jonathan's chest heaved. A storm raged inside him. Why show this to me now? The doppelganger's smile twisted sharp. Because everything you think you own, everything you believe is real, is built on the absence of that truth. Suddenly, Mila's eyes widened. Something inside shifted. Her breath hitched. Jonathan. No. What? He asked, panic snapping. She reached into her jacket. Everyone leaned back, eyes locked. Slowly, she pulled out a small device, sleek, alive with blinking lights, and pressed a button. The video screen on the wall blinked to life. Faces filled the room. Not just photos, not just shadows. Real faces, caught on tape. Men and women Jonathan trusted, his closest allies, talking in cold whispers. But the footage was worse. Jonathan himself, smiling, nodding, signing papers he didn't remember. And then, the final shock, a clip of Adam, alive, older, but terrified, speaking to a man who looked exactly like the stranger standing there. My brother never left, Mila said quietly. He was taken, hidden, used, and you, she looked at Jonathan, you helped cover it up. The room exploded. All talk, all gasps, a chorus of betrayal and horror. Jonathan sank down, head spinning. The world he built turned to dust. Eli wasn't just Mila. Mila wasn't just a rebel. And this stranger, this shadow, they were all parts of the same nightmare. And now, a new question stabbed through the chaos. How far did Jonathan Cross's empire go? And how deep did his own darkness run? The city outside stayed indifferent, but inside, the truth was screaming for blood. The weight of the footage settled like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating. Jonathan's knees shook, breath shallow. Mila's grip on his wrist was a fragile lifeline in the chaos. His sister and his enemy, holding on just enough to keep him tethered. Around the room, faces blurred into shadows of disbelief. Whispers turned into frantic shouts. Phones slipped out of trembling hands. The boardroom was no longer a haven of control. It was a cage cracking beneath the pressure of truth. Adam, Jonathan whispered, voice barely a thread, a name that tore at everything he thought he knew. The giant edifice of his life fractured piece by piece. Before another word could escape his lips, a sudden crash split the room. A brutal knock of glass against steel. The building shuddered, lights flickered wildly, and the ceiling above groaned like a beast waking. Then, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against every ear. All breaths stopped, and then the floor beneath Jonathan gave way. One second he was grasping for Mila. The next he was falling, heart in his throat, screams lost in the hollow pit of the collapse. Darkness swallowed him. He landed hard. Pain exploded in his ribs, sharp and burning. Dust choked the air, thick and bitter in his lungs. Around him, rubble lay in cruel heaps, steel girders, thrust like broken bones. "Jonathan!" Mila's voice cracked through the haze. His head rolled, eyes snapping open to see her face, pale but alive, inches away. "Stay with me," he gasped, clutching her hand, even as his own pulse hammered wild. But before he could move, a shadow shifted beyond the dust. A figure stepping out of the wreckage. It wasn't the stranger. Not Mila. Not Eli. It was someone else. Someone Jonathan never expected. A woman. Sharp, calm, dressed in dark, with eyes that didn't blink. She moved with a predator's confidence, like someone who owned the chaos. "Surprised to see me?" Her voice was velvet, chilling and low. Jonathan's mind convulsed. The face wasn't just familiar. It was his. Not a twin, not a distant cousin. This was a woman. His mirror image. The reflection he'd never known existed. She smiled, slow and cruel. "I'm you, or rather, who you could have been." Gasps echoed behind her. Mila's hand trembled in his. The paramedics froze. The board looked dumbfounded. Jonathan tried to speak. His voice was cracked. What do you mean?" She crouched down, eyes boring into his. "This empire, this mess, it's all a choice." She straightened, calm like storm thunder ready to break. "You made a decision years ago, to bury the parts of yourself that cared, the parts that loved Adam, the parts that wanted to save us all." Jonathan's chest tightened like a vice. "Imagine if you'd chosen differently. A version of you that fought harder, loved deeper." She looked to Mila, then back at Jonathan, voice dropping, sharp. A version who survived without sacrificing a brother. The room closed in, breathless. "And I'm the result of the road you didn't take." Her hand reached into her coat, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a gun. Jonathan's eyes widened. "No!" Mila shouted, panic slicing sharp as glass. But the woman aimed, calm, sure. "Don't move!" The gun clicked, empty. A laugh, cold and soft. "Relax. I'm not here to kill. But why come now? Why reveal yourself?" Jonathan's voice was raw, trembling. She stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Because the real war isn't outside this tower. It's inside every choice you made, inside every lie you buried. Now, what will you do when the real you stands in the rubble?" The city's distant hum seemed to fade, and the question hung, thick, electric, in the smoky air. Who is Jonathan Cross, really? And how many of him are left to fight? The air hung thick, heavy with dust and confusion. Jonathan's breath shuddered in his chest, eyes locked on the woman's cold smile. His own face, yet impossible. The gun's empty click still echoed in his ears. Mila's hand trembled in his, her hope fragile but alive. Around them, the rubble whispered threats, the broken glass glittering like sharp lies under the emergency lights. "What do you want from me?" Jonathan's voice cracked, raw with exhaustion. The woman stepped closer, slow and sure, her eyes flickering with something wild. Mockery, or maybe pity. "I want you to see," she said, voice low and fierce, "to remember who you really are. Not the boardroom hero, not the empire's king, but the man who buried everything." Jonathan blinked, trying to hold on as his heart tangled with pain and confusion. Then, a sudden burst of noise cut through the silence. A siren's wail, sharp and urgent, pierced the cracked walls. But beneath the siren, something else crawled into the room. A chill that froze blood and stilled breath. Jonathan's stomach lurched as the lights flickered again. This time, the boardroom's sleek walls dissolved. Not just cracked, but melting, twisting like wax. Faces around him blurred, stretching into shadows. The woman's eyes widened, flickers of panic breaking her mask. And then, Jonathan realized this wasn't a tower. It was a cell. The walls behind him faded into cold metal bars. The air turned electric with a harsh, sterile smell, too clean to be real life. The distant city noise shredded into silence. Mila's grit slipped, her face draining of color. Jonathan spun, looking for her. But she wasn't there. Instead, from the shadows stepped a man. Sharp suit, hawk eyes, that dangerous calm that punched nerves raw. Only, Jonathan's breath hitched as the man smiled. It was the man, the one he'd seen in the photograph. Adam, but not the brother he remembered. This Adam's smile was a razor, cutting open every memory Jonathan thought he'd buried. "Welcome back," Adam said, voice low and haunting. "Or maybe, welcome in, because you've never really left." Jonathan's throat closed, panic ripping through every vein. "Where?" "The Empire, the deals, the faces you thought were yours." Adam's eyes flashed cold fire. "They're lies, puppets, dancing in a play you never controlled." Jonathan struggled, his hands shaking, gripping phantom walls. "Why are you doing this?" he gasped. Adam's smile darkened, cruel and final. "Because you need to remember the truth before this ends, before they come back." He glanced toward the shadows, voice dropping. "They've been watching." Jonathan's heart hammered like a drum in a war zone. Sweat slicked his palms. "And Mila, Eli, the twin, the chaos?" he whispered, trembling with fragile hope. Adam's eyes bored in, sharp, merciless. "They're part of the game too, but not your players, not your side." A bitter laugh escaped Jonathan's lips. "I don't understand," he choked. Adam stepped closer, dropping his voice to a whisper heavy as chains. The real empire was never in those boardrooms. It's here. He tapped his temple, voice echoing in the hollow metal around them. In your mind, your memories, your reality. Jonathan's breath stuttered. What are you saying? Adam's grin cracked wide. This, he gestured to the cage around them, the walls bending and twisting like nightmare flesh, is the truth. Or at least, your truth. The others, the chaos, parts of a fractured mind, a confession you couldn't face, and now it's collapsing. Jonathan's head spun, thoughts shredded. Then, what happened to me? Who am I? What's real? Adam's smile turned darker still. Does it matter? When the real question is, are you even still here? The metal they stood within seemed to pulse, breathless. Jonathan's eyes darted wildly. Mila, Eli, his sister, his doppelgänger. All voices inside a broken man's mind? Or was this the nightmare, and he was the prisoner? A wave of cold crashed over him. The last thing Jonathan saw was his own reflection fractured in the mirror across the cell, smiling back at him. Only it wasn't him. And then the heavy steel door behind him groaned open. A whisper cut through the void. Time's up, Jonathan. The city outside was gone. The empire, the lies, the blood. Nothing but echoes in a cage. And somewhere deep inside, a question clawed free. Who had trapped him here? And why? The steel door creaked open slow, like it was dragging something heavy behind it. Jonathan blinked through the haze, his chest tight, eyes sharp. A figure stepped in. But it wasn't Adam. Not exactly. It was a woman, taller than he expected, with cold blue eyes, and a voice that sliced through the silence like ice. "Jonathan," she said, stepping closer, her stare never breaking. "You've been holding on to the wrong truths." He swallowed hard, heart hammering. "Who are you?" A bitter smile touched her lips. "You already know." She reached up and pulled back her hood, and there it was, the face he knew like his own. Only this time, it had a flicker, an edge. One side of her face was Jonathan's. The other was something else, something broken. Scars zigzagged across half her cheek, the sharp contrast almost like a mirror, shattered and glued back wrong. Jonathan's breath hitched. His hand gripped the cold metal bars behind him. "I'm not your lost twin," she said softly, voice rough around the edges. "I'm the real Jonathan Cross." The room spun. Mila's grip tightened on his wrist somewhere, a shaky anchor. "What?" he croaked. She stepped forward, the light catching the scars, the fire in her eyes. "You're a copy, a fabrication, a lie wrapped in power suits and polished smiles. The empire you built, it's not yours. It's stolen from me." Jonathan's mind screamed no. His chest burned with disbelief. "That can't be. I lived this." "Did you?" Her voice cracked, deep with pain. "Or did you just believe the lies they fed you?" A sudden crash ripped through the cell. The lights flickered, then died. In the darkness, her voice dropped low, sharper than a blade. I've been trapped for years, locked away while you ran free, wearing my face, living my life. But I'm here now, and I'm taking it back. Jonathan's hands shook, a lump caught in his throat. The cage around them seemed to pulse, alive, the cold metal biting into his palms. From the shadows, footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate. Mila's voice whispered, shaky and unsure. "John, this can't be true." "No," he gasped, eyes wide with terror. "You're," the woman snapped, eyes wild, "is the lie you tell yourself so you don't drown." The steel bars behind Jonathan suddenly dissolved into smoke, swirling like shadows in the dark. The cell melted away. One moment, he was trapped, helpless. The next, he was standing face to face with himself. Not just a reflection, but two versions, side by side. One wore suits, smiled cold and easy. The other, scarred and fierce, burned with rage. "I'm the one who remembers," she said, voice steady. "The one who lived what you forgot." A shiver tore down Jonathan's spine. "Why?" he asked, voice cracking. "Why erase me? Why replace me?" She stepped forward, biting back a laugh that tasted like acid. "To hide the truth. To bury the blood in your hands." Suddenly, the door behind them slammed open. Adam appeared. But this Adam wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes held a storm. "The truth," he said, voice low, "is darker than either of you can imagine." Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. "Because," Adam continued, "you're all pieces, fragments, parts of a man who never existed." Mila stumbled forward, tears in her eyes. "You never were whole. Not Jonathan, not Eli. Not the sister you lost. None of it." The three stared at each other, broken reflections, fractured souls, and in that moment, the world cracked open. A deep, booming voice thundered from nowhere and everywhere. "Welcome to the experiment." The walls exploded with lights, screens flashing data, images, faces, millions of them. Every version, every lie, every reality, simultaneously true and false. Jonathan's heart shattered. His mind spiraled. He wasn't a man. He was a construct, a character in someone else's design. "Mila, Eli, Adam, you were never real," said the voice, cold as space. "The Empire, the chaos, a simulation, a test." The screams of his mind echoed. He fell to his knees. The last shred of certainty ripped away. "Who am I?" he whispered. And the answer, when it came, was worse than nothing. "You're what they wanted you to be." Silence hung thick. Then a single haunting beep. A countdown, starting again. The question wasn't who had trapped Jonathan Cross. It was who was watching. And what would happen when the clock reached 0. The countdown blinked red and cold on the wall. 10, 9, 8. Jonathan's chest felt like it was being slammed by a freight train. His hands trembled, fingers clawing the empty air as if they could grasp a shred of truth. The voices inside his head. The whispers of Mila, Eli, Adam, drowned beneath the harsh beep of that relentless timer. 7, 8. Suddenly, the room pulsed. The metal walls rippled and split like torn paper, revealing a blinding white light that sucked the air right out of his lungs. He squinted, the glow burning his eyes, and then a violent jolt threw him backward. He crashed onto cold, hard pavement. His breath exploded out like a punch, lungs raw and screaming. The sky above wasn't ceiling lights or flickering screens. It was stars, real stars. He blinked rapidly, disoriented. This was a street, narrow alleys, neon signs flickering, damp concrete, a city alive with distant noise. A voice, sharp, guttural, broke the silence. "About time you woke up." Jonathan's head whipped to the side. There, leaning against a cracked brick wall, was a man with tired eyes and a crooked grin, wearing the same hoodie Eli had once worn. Skinny, streetwise, but with that fire burning behind his gaze. Who the hell are you?" Jonathan gasped, still catching his breath. The man laughed, a sound rough and impossible to place. "Name's Eli," he said, stepping forward, "but not the one you think. The real Eli, the one you buried under your lies." Jonathan's throat tightened, confusion choking him. No, Mila told me. She said you were. You don't know shit," Eli snapped, cutting in. "Mila? She played you, just like you played everyone. You imprisoned me, made me vanish, made me a ghost in your empire." Jonathan's head spun. The pieces, shattered beyond repair, tried to lock together, but only cut deeper. Before he could speak, another figure stepped from the shadows. A woman, tall and fierce, eyes darker than midnight, face familiar, broken by scars and flame, but unmistakably Mila. Without a word, she knelt beside Jonathan, gripping his hand. Her voice was soft but fierce. "John, this isn't a dream," she whispered. "None of this is." Before he could ask what she meant, Eli's grin twisted into something harder. "You built your life on my ruin, on your brother's silence." Jonathan's breath hitched cold. "Adam." He barely said the name and it tore through him again. Eli's voice dropped, venom laced with pain. "He's alive. Because of me. Because of what you did." The alley pulsed, shadows growing teeth and claws. Suddenly, from the darkness, a dozen figures emerged, faces blurred, voices strange, but chillingly familiar. A chorus of whispers clawed the air, drowning everything. Jonathan's heart lurched when the crowd began to chant his name, but twisted, mocking, and broken. Then a crushing blow hit his ribs. He staggered, pain squeezing the air from his lungs. "Wake up, Jonathan," Mila said fiercely. "You're not just a prisoner in a cage, you're trapped inside their game." A sharp laugh echoed nearby. The man, Adam, stepped forward, his eyes cold fire. "No," Jonathan gasped. "This can't be." Adam smiled, slow and cruel. You were never the king. You were their lab rat. The sky tore open above them. A screaming wail blasted through the alley as the world seemed to ripple and shift like water. Jonathan dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. Then, as if the city itself cracked open beneath him, Eli stretched out his hand. Want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes? Jonathan hesitated, but desperation swallowed fear. His fingers brushed Eli's palm, and in an instant, everything shattered. He was no longer in the alley, not in the cell, not the boardroom. He was in a sterile room, walls white and bright, the kind of place where time disappears. And watching him through glass, thousands of eyes, all strangers and familiar faces, sat behind monitors, silent but hungry. A cold voice dripped through hidden speakers. You are the prototype, the beginning, a test, but not yet the end. The ground beneath Jonathan's world fell away. Fragments of his past, his pain, his lies, they were nothing more than data. And the echoing question thundered louder than ever. Who created this nightmare? And for what price? Jonathan's breath froze, because the greatest twist had just begun. The man in the glass smiled. You're not just a victim. You're the product, and they're about to switch you off. The glass wall in front of Jonathan blinked, a cold, sterile mirror reflecting a face he barely recognized. The man behind the glass smirked, darker than a midnight shadow. You're not just a victim. You're the product, and they're about to switch you off. Jonathan's chest tightened like a trap snapping shut. The dirt and dust from the ruins still clung to him, but all he could focus on was that voice, the voice that promised oblivion. Then, a crack. The glass didn't just crack, it exploded. Shards flew, slicing light and air. Heart pounding, Jonathan jumped back, scrambling for cover. But what came next shattered everything. Behind the broken glass, another face appeared. A little boy, barefoot, dirty, eyes hollow yet burning. "Dad?" Jonathan froze. The boy blinked and smiled shyly. The voice, faint but chilling, came from the broken speakers. "Jonathan Cross, meet your son." The room tilted. Son? No one had told him about a child. No memory, no warning. Jonathan's breath hitched. His hands trembled like leaves in a storm. "Son," he whispered, voice cracking like old wood. The boy took a hesitant step forward, the flicker of hope in his eyes twisted with a strange sadness. And then the screens behind the shattered glass flickered to life. Scenes, videos, a sickening montage of Jonathan holding the boy, a child he couldn't remember, laughing, sleeping, teaching him to walk. But in every shot, the boy grew paler, thinner, sick, and then it got worse. One clip had Jonathan signing papers, contracts meant to fund secret experiments. A government logo flickered in a corner. Another showed the boy hooked to machines, his fragile body trapped in sterile tubes. Jonathan's mind screamed silent words. I never knew. I never saw. He twirled, clutching his head. Why didn't I remember this? Why? The voice came back through the shattered speakers. Colder, cruel. Because you weren't meant to. Suddenly, the woman from the cell, the scarred mirror of him, stepped through the fragments of glass, calm and deadly. I'm not your enemy, John, she said softly, eyes fierce. The Empire, the lies, they buried your son to keep you chasing ghosts. Jonathan fell to his knees. Tears came unbidden, burning paths down a face numb with shock. I have a son, and he's dying. Because of me. The room, the cell, the nightmare collapsed into silence. Then there was a new sound, a tiny, desperate heartbeat echoing from the fractured glass. Jonathan looked up. The boy stepped through the shards as if they were nothing, laughing, alive. Mistake, the kid said softly. You're not the real Jonathan. The room froze. Mila gasped somewhere distant. Adam's shadow flickered. Who are you? Jonathan whispered, trembling. The boy smiled, wide, aching. I'm the son you erased, and the future you never wanted. The countdown blinked behind him. Time bleeding away. Jonathan's heart shattered again. Because the nightmare wasn't just about who he was. It was about who he left behind. And now, his past was reaching back for blood. The question screamed louder than ever. What if saving him means losing everything? The countdown faded into silence. Jonathan's breath caught heavy in his chest, sweat slick on his palms. The shattered glass, the flickering screens, the weight of every secret, all clung tight, like chains dragging him deeper into a nightmare. The boy, the son, stepped forward, eyes empty but burning with a strange fire. You erased me from your mind, he said, voice soft, yet cutting like broken glass. But I'm still here, always waiting, always watching. Jonathan's knees trembled beneath him. A lump rose in his throat, the raw taste of regret burning deep. He reached out, but his hands shook like leaves in a storm. No, I didn't know, he whispered, a crack in his armor. The scarred woman, the real Jonathan, stepped beside the boy, her fierce eyes softening for the first time. It's not too late, she said. You can fight. You can make it right. The room shifted again. Lights flickered. The walls faded into a vast, empty space. A blank slate waiting for a final choice. Jonathan looked between the boy and the woman. The weight crushed him, the darkness pulling. But somewhere deep inside, a fragile spark flickered. I don't want to lose him, Jonathan said, voice breaking, trembling hands grasping at hope. Eli's face, the real one, from the alley, appeared in a shimmer beside them. Then fight for what's left, for the truth. The countdown, silent now, lifted like a storm retreating. Jonathan closed his eyes, drew in a shaky breath, and made a decision. The shattered pieces of his fractured mind began to pull together, not perfectly, not painlessly, but real. He reached out, fingers closing around the boy's small hand, feeling life, hope, a thread back to something pure. The room brightened. The noise dimmed. Silence wasn't empty now. It was breathing. But the question remained. A razor slicing through the quiet. What happens to a man who's never been whole? The screen faded to black. Hey, yeah, you need to subscribe now. Click that button so you don't miss a single twist, a single secret from stories like this. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm and make sure this story reaches the people who need to hear it. And don't you dare just sit there. Flood the comments with your thoughts. Who's real? What's next? I want to read every theory, every gasp, every shock you felt. Finally, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends. Let them live this chaos, feel this heartbreak, catch the twist that blew your mind. Only true fans know the power of support. Only you can keep the stories coming. So subscribe, like, comment, share. The nightmare's not over, and trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next.